Well, it's the top of the hour here in Cleveland, Ohio, headquarters for the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers. Many of you on the screen I know by name and face, so thanks for being with us. I'm Craig McAtee, Executive Director and CEO of the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers. And this is our last member drop-in of the year, but we plan another 4 minimum next year for all of our members and those that want to find out more about what we do. And this is our chance to really give more of an audience when we can't be face to face to all of you to talk about our pillars. And we focus on one pillar of our 4 every quarter. This one happens to be all about competency-based education coupled with industry recognized credentials. We call it Pillar 3. And it's one of those that's evolving as we speak. A lot of colleges have started moving toward competency-based education or an applied learning model of some kind, as well as crosswalking that curriculum sometimes with industry recognized credentials and certifications, whether it's NC3 or MSSC or NIMS or any others like AWS welding. There's a lot of those out there that industry does recognize, as you all know. And we're here to talk about 3 or 4 of those that are in best practices from our board members and articles in the newsletter that just came out this Tuesday. Hopefully you've seen that. If not, I will put that in the chat along the journey with you today. But before I turn it over to our moderator, Linda Head, I want to let you know, please, along the way, if you have a question, type it in the chat if you like to be a placeholder. We'll certainly have plenty of time for interaction because these overview presentations will be brief compared to full-blown webinar because we want to hear from you. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce Linda Head, who's finishing up her first year on NCATC's board right now, and we are so thrilled that she's part of our ecosystem. And she actually has been for decades, but it's first time she's ever been on our board. She's a senior associate vice chancellor for external and employer relations at Lone Star College in Houston, Texas. So without delay, welcome, Linda. Thank you for being here. Mute.
You're on mute, Linda.
Hello. And I don't always wear satin and glitter to work, but it is the holidays, and we had a holiday event about an hour ago. I just want to say NCATC is the affiliated council that you need to stay a member of in 2024. And our esteemed executive director is very well connected with AACC WTI. So we hope you'll visit with us there. I have the honor of introducing the 3 panelists today. I'm going to start with Amanda Sizemore. She serves as the Assistant Vice President for Workforce, Technical, and Community Education at St. Charles Community College. And she has managed and implemented workforce and community development programming and consulting projects for over 30 years. Amanda strives to serve the community by supporting initiatives which promote workforce and community development opportunities in the region. She's advanced those projects by procuring funding through federal, state, and private sources and building relationships in a multitude of areas. She serves as a liaison with the Missouri Department of Economic Development and is the past president of the board of NCATC. She serves as SCC's lead rep for the United States Department of Labor TACT statewide grants. And she's a co-principal investigator for the National Science Foundation Advanced Technical Education Grants. She's a board member of the St. Charles County Workforce Investment Board and serves as a member of the Missouri Economic Development Council, the Missouri Community College Association, blah, 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 on and on and on. She's been very, very involved. If you haven't met her, you need to say hello at our next conference and learn from her, and she's going to share best practice today. She's also received many awards. One is she's the recipient of the Beyond the Best Top 50 in Business Awards and a Chamber of Commerce Community Servant Award. So isn't that really cool? You'll hear from Amanda in just a sec. Becky Epps. I also have the honor of serving on a committee of the board with Becky. She is the current chairwoman of the marketing committee and has taught me everything I know about the marketing committee, and I'm very obligated to her about that. She has 20+ years experience managing state and federal training grants with the college. In her role as manager of the Center for Workforce Innovation, Becky oversees several technical training programs, including HVAC, industrial maintenance, automated controls, welding, general maintenance mechanic, and the Boeing pre-employment training program. She manages the school's portion of a statewide Department of Labor Consortium grant called the Missouri Apprenticeships and Manufacturing Programs Grant, focused on creating and expanding apprenticeships. We're honored to have Becky today and hear from her and what is going on at her school. And then last, we have Tony Oren. For over 25 years, he has worked at the convergence of industry and education. He is dedicated to finding ways to bring employers together with leaders in career and technical education and STEM to co-develop real-time solutions to issues around manufacturing technologies and the skills grant. And we love that CTE is also STEM, right? And we thank Tony for carrying that for us nationally. Tony spent nearly 20 years with a global leader in automation and advanced manufacturing technology, where he ran their North American Training and Education Division. Many of us got to know him there. He now serves as CEO of CoderZ, a leading STEM and computer science program provider. And of course, he's also a board member and part of our Strategic Partners Network. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Linda.
To remember, just as a reminder, this is NCATC's Strategic Pillar 3, Competency-Based Education and Industry-Recognized Credentials for Workforce Development Programs. And you're going to hear some promising practices and good models, and we want to hear from you. So don't leave before we have a chance to hear from you. This is supposed to be where members share with members. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to you, Amanda, to kick us off, please.
So Linda, can you see that's my screen?
We can see your screen.
Okay, thanks. So they asked me to speak a little bit about the project that we are part of, that was funded through a grant sponsored by GM and administered through AACC. And it's a specific initiative regarding integrating manufacturing credentials and how that can apply at a community college. So the cohort that is part of this particular grant involves 7 community colleges that are distributed in areas that are at or near GM facilities and GM plants. Multiple states, small ones. I come from a small community college just outside of the St. Louis area, to some of our larger community colleges in the United States. But the scope of the study, and I think that's kind of where the big story kind of pertains to, is really the idea to explore options to launch individuals into higher skills and higher wage opportunities in different ways and different pathways, if you will. One of the quotes that I got from Dr. Bumpkus when they did their press release was, identifying skills, training, promising, and best practices. That's the goal, where there's a solid bridge between skills education and the skills needed for success in today's modern manufacturing facilities. So I think that's a big key in this project. It's what are the models that are happening out there? What are things that we can leverage from corporate activities and those that are creating and leveraging technology from the corporate side, so the supplier and vendor side, to those that are involved in different kinds of innovative models within the application of a higher education, even at a K-12 collaboration. What are they doing? How are they incorporating credentials as a whole? How are we defining competencies and validating competencies? How can we incorporate that into our programs, in our degrees, and advancing those pathways? Not only for the purpose of assisting our employers in identifying the skills that their current employees might have, but also looking at opportunities as the emerging or transitioning workforce is trying to ramp up their skills and address gaps to position themselves well in that industry. So as part of that study, we're also looking at timing and delivery strategies. You know, what can be done in a condensed time period? What can be done via the use of technology? We're all facing a lot of barriers, education, employers, manufacturing. Those barriers we're having to be creative on how to address those barriers. Lack of instructors, lack of transportation, the need for employers to have those individuals within their facilities and not be able to release them for training off-site or even within their own plant. So what can we do creatively to address the needs to close those skills gaps? And then, really the sequencing, how can we sequence? How can we stack? How can we transition? How can we introduce some of the new technology that into our training programs from a post-secondary level to address the new technology that is actually being implemented and introduced into the manufacturing arenas? So these are parts of the things that are included in the scope of this study that's being done right now. Each institution that's part of this is taking a different approach, but what the study does allow us to do is really work with and benchmark things that are happening out there. And part of my thing here today, hopefully, is you guys can maybe give me ideas on how you're doing that. How can we document it? How can we validate it? Different ways to do different things within our institutions to address the needs of the whole. So the timing on the study, the work right now is ongoing. It's about a 1.5-year project. All institutions are at different places in different ways, depending on the communities that they're serving and the approaches that they're taking. There will be a panel discussion during the Workforce Development Institute in January that'll talk a little bit more about this project, the reasoning that GM got behind this project, and then some of the things that we're finding as we go. The actual findings and outcomes report is anticipated to be released during mid 24. So hopefully by then we'll have some additional condensed versions that we can share with the whole. So it's a quick version of what's going on with the grant, but it's been a neat project. Here I'm at a very small community college that serves rural and densely populated suburban areas. We don't have public transportation. We have limited resources as far as instructors go. We have consistent openings for positions, well-paying positions in our manufacturing employers. And they're hiring individuals that may have extremely, if any, limited skills in the areas, and their needs to figure out ways to close the gap so that they can become successful and create a career pathway for themselves within the environment. So that's kind of a real quick version of what's going on with that particular grant. So.
Thank you, Amanda. That's really fascinating. And it must be interesting to take a small rural urban colleges all together in the room, sharing what their businesses need and what you can and cannot do, right?
Yeah.
Are you in this work looking at the various national industry certifications that exist today, and then maybe help us, since manufacturing is an area without, IT has certifications
Yes.
galore and manufacturing does not. Are you looking at that as part of it?
I think that that's all within the scope. I will tell you that each individual school is taking kind of a different, which is the nice part about it, if you will. Each individual school that's part of the cohort has taken different approaches. We're really looking at industry credentials. And when I say in the use of industry recognized credentials, I kind of have backed away from the recognized part and really looking at the competencies, because that's the piece that if we can align competencies to the skills gaps that our employers are facing, that is a way for us to at least identify where the individuals are and ways and approaches that we can close the gaps. And to be real honest, it gives us a standard platform for documenting and recording and aligning to the curriculum and the programs we have institutionally. So thereby which, if you will, creating the standardized platform for us to support them in a pathway, an academic pathway, and a skills competency pathway as well.
That's really cool. And then I suppose since AACC is convening this, they'll help get that message to DOL that there isn't always necessarily a industry recognized credential.
Yeah, I think that I have to be very careful. This is an AACC project, so but I think the plan is that there will be a product at the end of this that they anticipate leveraging and using for dissemination.
Very
So
neat. Thank you.
That's the ideal anyway.
Well, and after all three presenters finish, well, then we'll open up to the audience for questions. And again, as Craig said, please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them as we go along, but we'll have time in a few minutes to
And anybody
hear
that's
from-
got ideas and success stories, please share.
that too. You have a question now, Raymond, or?
Well, if you're going to open it up for just a moment, can you go back to slide number 2, please,
Sure.
Amanda?
Uh-huh. Let me share my screen again.
He was kind of like the guy on room 242 that used to go, "Ooh, ooh, follow me."
Is that the one you're looking for?
Right.
The
And
schools?
what I wanted to check was to see if Dallas College is listed there. They're a customer and they've recently asked us to asked me to come in and help them because they have an apprenticeship program for the GM plant there in Dallas. The GM plant that makes all the Suburbans
Yeah, okay.
across
Sounds like the
the
two
US.
of you should connect.
So they are not as one of the 7 colleges that got funded. This is a first of hopefully several but we're just but yeah, it's been great. Like I said, I'm a smaller school, but there's some big schools in the mix here, and it's been great kind of learning at the different levels of those that got funded. And I think I don't want to talk for anyone at AACC or GM, but I suspect they may have done that with a little bit of purpose to mix that up a little bit. So
All right, well, we'll get you two connected. You might want to share, Raymond, your contact information in the chat. That would be fantastic.
Oh, yes. All right. Very good.
Please. Becky, I'm going to hand it next to you.
All right, thank you. While I'm sharing my screen, I will say that I went to Amanda's small community college, unnamed number of years ago, and it was really small then. I think it's growing quite a bit. Let me see. All right, can you see it?
We can.
Perfect. All right, so my article that I submitted really talked about the the employment shortage, staffing shortage that companies have seen, right? That's not news to anybody here. And so what I kind of want to talk about, so when you get a chance to look at that and read that, it talks about different things, and I'm going to touch on those a little bit. But then I want to talk about how are we addressing that shortage, right? The companies, the community colleges, that sort of thing. What we've seen is experience, right? A lot of companies want experience, and some are saying, and it was in the article, that they're kind of backing off from that just out of necessity, right? Maybe experience, if we want to fill certainly some of these entry-level positions, experience isn't what we're going to find. We have all heard this, I'm sure. Give me someone who will look me in the eye, shake my hand, show up on time and every day, and I'll teach them the skills they need, right? We've heard that. Whenever you ask companies to, what are you missing in applicants? They're always saying it's the soft skills, as they call them. You know, the attendance, the attitude, that sort of thing. I would argue with companies at times to say, no, you have an online application process, you will never meet that person because they don't have anything on their resume that would attract you or get them through that first level of screening in that system. And that's where I think community colleges come into play. We can get them the training, and we can also work, and that training that will show up on a resume, right? So that'll have some of those keywords that will pique the interest of someone, or if it's an automated system like some of the larger companies, it will hit some of those and they'll be able to get their resume to the next level. So under my training here, I have interview starts on day 1 of training. So to address back to that first statement, that's what I tell companies. You know, if you hire from our program, we tell our students while you're here, you are in the interview process. Our company and our industry partners will ask us, you know, what was their attendance like, that sort of thing. And that's information, you know, to a point we can share. We can teach those soft skills along with the technical skills as well. So credentials. So I laughed, Amanda, when you said that about recognized, because I have that recognized by industry partners, ? They're not always. And we found that out several years ago on a federal grant or a consortium grant that Amanda and St. Charles Community College was on as well, is that we were pushing some of these credentials. And we found out that companies didn't necessarily know about them. They didn't value them. They weren't looking for them on a resume. So we dug a little further, we found out that maybe these credentialing bodies were meeting with the CEOs and the company presidents and really getting, you know, some of that buy-in from them. And that wasn't always trickling down to a hiring manager or HR or anything like that. So you can say these companies are on board with credentials, but that doesn't mean that the folks that are doing the hiring are aware of them, or the people that are doing the supervising are aware of them. Another thing we found is that, you know, we do have credentials in our programs, of course. We have found that not all of them are necessarily appropriate or a good fit for that program. So we have one particular program, our industrial maintenance, that we had some industry recognized credentials, a credential tied to, and we've kind of backed off that. I won't mention who that is. There's nothing wrong with the credentials. And we actually use them in another program by the same credentialing body, and they're fantastic and they're well known. For this particular one, it wasn't. And it was very difficult. They were very difficult. And we found that as long as the students and the graduates had the training and we were showing that they could do the hands-on work on the equipment, that's what companies were happy with. They were not needing this credential, which was really a huge hoop for these students to jump through. So on some of those, we really backed off of those credentials. Competency-based training. So certainly, if with the credential and if it is recognized and people know it, they know what that means. But at community colleges, and most of my programs are non-credit, at community college, we're really good at our certificates, right? So what we have on the with non-credit programs is a certificate of completion, and it will say so-and-so finished, 200 hours of industrial maintenance training. And that's what our certificate says. And you're thinking, that doesn't tell anyone anything. So why do we have that? 200 hours means nothing, right? We don't know what they're getting there. We don't know what they've proven they can do. So two of the programs that we have, where they do get a certificate of completion, but they're really very competency-based, competency strong, are our welding and our Boeing pre-employment. So our welding program is new. We started a couple of years ago. Like I said, it is non-credit. It is self-paced. Our instructor that we hired ran another welding program at another community college or technical college for 20 plus years. He came in knowing exactly how he wanted to run it. It's been going great, but there is not, 40 hours of TIG, 40 hours of stick. It doesn't go that way. He has an order in which it goes. And once you can show competency in oxyacetylene, then you move forward. So it might take you a week, it might take you 2 weeks, it might take you a month, but that's when you move forward. And other people are going at different paces. So it's really been interesting to see. It's kind of really outside of the box for me, for sure, to wrap my head around it. But it has really made it's made it really exciting in the class because they get very competitive, right? They know they're not all next Monday moving on to the next session. They have to prove what they're doing. So it is offered in 8-week sessions. They're in the lab 4 hours a day, 4 days a week for 8 weeks. And again, it's very hard to kind of look at how do you grade that, and it will eventually become a credit program. So that's something that we're really going to have to take a hard look at and really think outside the box to be able to fit that into the parameters of credit. But now what the instructor does is he does an assessment on them at the end of every 8 weeks, letting them know where they are and what they'll be moving on to the next 8 weeks. Meanwhile, he's working with them every day and they move on. Any given day, someone could move to the next topic. And that has been a great success. One interesting story, though, is we had a young man interview at a company. They've hired like 3 or 4 of our people. But they said, we went out and met with the company and did a tour. And we were talking with them. We told them how the program ran. And one of the managers kind of chuckled and goes, okay, now that makes sense. And we said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we asked him when he was going to graduate and complete the welding program. And he said he didn't know. And we couldn't figure out what he meant by that. And that's why we don't say you will be done at this date. It is when they are able to show competency in those areas. And honestly, most of our folks aren't getting all the way through the program. They're getting plucked out by industry and getting jobs. So it's been a really successful program. Our second is our Boeing pre-employment program. So we do entry-level sheet metal and composites technology training for Boeing. We've been doing it for many years. It is a timed clock hour program. So our sheet metal is 200 hours. Our composites is 160 hours, I believe, 120 maybe. And although there is that attached to it, it is also competency-based because there are certain hands-on projects. And if they don't get a certain score, they are out. So they don't just complete the whole 200 hours and then someone gets a D or an F and then someone gets an A or a B. They actually have to be showing that they are able to do that step before they can move on to the next. And if by that certain time they can't do it or haven't finished their project or failed it, they are out of the program. And again, it's kind of a harsh reality to have that conversation with folks, but it is also, I think it's helpful. First of all, certainly at Boeing, they're building airplanes. So you don't want people in there that just don't have the skill to do it. You also don't want to put someone in a job they're not very good at because they're not going to be happy there. So we want to make sure we're getting the right people in a field that they are comfortable in and into a job. Any questions?
Becky, I have one before we move on. In mastery learning and competency-based education, it is difficult because each of your students are at a different place. Is this really relying on an excellent instructor? Do you have lab coordinators? How does that work?
Yes, it is relying on an excellent instructor. So just like our companies worry about people retiring, we do the same, right? And we all do in the community college with our technical instructors. It is very heavily reliant on our instructor. So there is the hope that we are able to put this, kind of box it up so that if he were to retire or when he retires, we are able to keep that moving. And again, like I said, it will be going to it will become a credit program. So we still want to be able to keep that flexibility, and be able to put some meat and bones behind it.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Next up is Tony. Tony, the floor is yours. Oh, and before you get started, I just wanted to recognize, I saw Craig Lamb join us. He serves as the president of the board. He's leaving us in December. Do you want to say hello, Craig, before we move on?
I will, and I apologize profusely. I got stuck in another board meeting and was unable to sign in when I promised I would. But it's great to see everybody here and discussing such great topics. So I'll just get out of the way and chime in later.
Thank you for being here. All right, now, Tony, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Linda. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Amanda and Becky. I really appreciate what you presented today, because I think what we're starting to see is there's no one solution to this challenge, right? And some of what I put in my article for the newsletter was, again, back to the statistics that Becky was talking about. You know, by 2030, which is right around the corner, especially in my world now, there's only 4 units of time left: Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. And so the year goes by really quickly. So 2030 is upon us. The workforce that would need to be in place in 2030, they're entering their later levels of education as we speak. And but by 2030, 4.3 million shortage of STEM talent, 40 million qualified developer shortage today, expected to reach 85 million by 2030. And then the 2.1 million that I've been using for years from NAM has been updated now to 2.4 million unfilled manufacturing jobs by 2030. So we got a lot of work to do between now and 2030, or we've got a major crisis on our hands. But at the same time, and it was interesting, Corey Adams from Universal Robotics posted just today on LinkedIn about this, that all of this massive manufacturing expansion is taking place in the US right now, especially fueled on the backside of the pandemic, into a situation where we're already short of a talented workforce. We've got the challenge just continues to grow. And so this whole topic of competency-based learning and industry recognized credentials, or let's just say credentials, they go hand in hand, or they should go hand in hand, I should say. And in some cases they do, some cases they don't. But in order for us to even remotely reduce this gap, we do have to find a way. We've got to get more students interested in STEM and CTE. And that's my personal life's passion now, not just my career. How do I engage as many young minds as possible? It's why I made a career change, so that I'm not just focusing on 2-year colleges. I love our 2-year colleges. They provide an absolutely vital role in workforce development, but they simply don't have enough students coming to them to be able to provide this training and competency-based learning and credentials. So we've got a bigger problem, and that's addressing the younger minds. And I'm now in a position where I can actually offer a kindergarten to career learning path to bring as many young minds as possible in at kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, expose them to these brilliant worlds of STEM and CTE, and then continue on with them all the way through high school, post-secondary education, and into their career, because it's also a lifelong learning path too, right? So the days of graduating a 2-year college and sticking with that exact role or career, those days are behind us. And so they're constantly going to be entering and exiting the education system in some point. So in the article, I talk about competency-based learning, and that industry recognized credentials are a way to do that, because competency-based learning, we can move students through the system at a faster pace, just like Becky was talking about. Some of these students can grasp these concepts much quicker than others. And if we keep them in a time-based program, we risk losing them because they're bored. And I'll use myself as an example. I was quite familiar with all of my assistant principals all through my education, because I was bored in the classroom, and I spent a lot of time in their office. So I'll just put it that way. Because I wasn't engaged, I wasn't I wasn't, able to fully explore my potential, and I really didn't find out who I was until I finished high school and started working, that I find what I really wanted to do. So moving from time-based to competency-based is critical. And one of the ways that we can do that is through a credential program. And what Amanda said and what Becky said is absolutely true. If I could walk to any manufacturer within a 20-mile radius here, and I could throw 5 or 6 of the alphabet soup of credentialing bodies out there at them, and they probably won't recognize any of them. And at the end of the day, it's not whose name is on the piece of paper. What they're looking for is that validation that this individual can do A, B, C, and D. And regardless of how fantastic your college program is, and many of you have amazing programs, the fact that if they have a 2-year diploma from a college doesn't tell an employer what they can do. It does show they're committed because they graduated, and so that's a check mark. It's also still, Craig, I'm gonna steal your sorting hat comment yesterday from the board meeting. I thought that was fantastic. It is a sorting hat method of a mountain of resumes. For example, I posted just 2 weeks ago a customer success manager position. I got 500 applications. How do I sort through 500 applications? Well, the first step is, do they have a degree or not? Because that at least tells me they're educated and they can commit to complete. And I don't like to do that because I spent the first half of my career with no college degree and proving that I didn't have to have it. But it is still a sort mechanism. But what I'm looking for is I go right down to the very bottom and I look, what are their certifications? What are their credentials other than a diploma? What else have they achieved? And when we think about the bulk of the industry that we're serving, and I'll use manufacturing because manufacturing is a very broad term now. It's food, it's cars, it's anything, almost everything we touch in our daily lives is manufactured. So they're looking for skill sets. And yes, Becky, they will hire anybody that shows up on time, dressed appropriately, pass a drug test, et cetera. They will hire them. But then that employee is not efficient. That employee is not engaged. That employee is probably going to struggle to be successful because most companies, guess what? Yes, we'll train them, but manufacturers are terrible at training. It's not what they do. They produce widgets. They are not good at teaching people how to produce those widgets or to maintain the machines that produce those widgets. So that's where this competency based, but then competency verification. And I'll look at credentials. The most important element for me is that it verifies competency. So if you're looking to implement or embed credentials in your program, number one, make sure that there's a hands-on competency-based requirement to earn that certification, not just for example, a journeyman electrician has to complete X thousands of hours of on-the-job training. That's great. They're well trained and that's wonderful. But just because they spent 4 semesters at your 2-year college doesn't tell me what they can do or what they've learned to do. So it needs to be competency based because not all these credentialing companies are created equal. There's certainly a money grab out there with some of these certification entities, even nonprofit ones, because nonprofit organizations love profits and they're really good at finding ways to get profits out of a company. So just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean, oh, that's who I want to go with. You want to look for competency based and you want to look at who developed the parameters or the guidelines or the standards that competency is aligning to or verifying. And some of these credentialing companies simply don't have that. Other ones do a really fantastic job at vetting out the process. And I've worked with a lot of them either as a customer or as a board member or as a partner. And I'm not gonna use this to say who's good and who's bad. I'm happy to have an individual conversation with any of you. But there are some really good programs out there. But the keys for me, I'll just kind of recap, and I'd really like to get a dialogue going here. Competency based. So look at what competencies are being verified and how they're verifying those competencies. Who helped develop the standards or vetted or verified the standards? Are there any other endorsements tied to that certification? For example, ARM Institute currently has an endorsement program to endorse programs at schools and colleges, but also to endorse certification programs. to look for that third party vetting. And then finally, what are those competencies that are being developed? Do they align with what your local industry is looking for? And that's a great way to have a conversation with your local industry. Is a lot of times companies, it's amazing, but many companies can't tell you what competencies are needed for each job role. But if you show them a list, I can develop these competencies, tell me which ones are important. And if they can't tell you, that's also another opportunity for your college to become a consultant and say, well, we'll come out and we'll watch what you're doing on the floor, and we will identify what competencies are needed. And then we can align with what credential program best fits your individual needs. So this dialogue is really important. Don't just go grab a certification program, embed it in your college, and hope that you built it and now they will come. That's not enough. But you can also, the final thing that I didn't put in the article, but I think is also important, is if we're talking about how do we reduce the time, right? We talk about competency based, so maybe they can do it in 2 weeks instead of 2 months. But think about also articulation from middle school to high school to college to career. If we're embedding competency requirements throughout that program, why can't we have a middle schooler be able to demonstrate and document that they have these competencies, so when they go to high school, they can just continue to fill those gaps in their competency bank, so that maybe when they finish high school, they've already completed all the competencies that they would need at a two-year college. I know you don't want to hear that. You don't want to lose students, but those also can be dual enrollment, dual credit. You can still get credit for having that student, having that butt in your seat. But we don't have to wait till they're 18 to start building these competencies for these brilliant career paths. So I'll stop there because I can talk about this for hours.
Yeah, it sounds like you're all very passionate about what you do and have a lot of great experience. And maybe we need to get employers to fix job descriptions so that they list skills and competencies rather than just general, here's 8 or 9 things they need to know for a job. So, Tony's got an example. He's doing that now. What? So let's open it up. Raymond got to ask a question, and I know he's got more he wants to say. Clint, go right ahead.
Yeah, Becky and Tony, that was both awesome topics, and thanks for sharing that. I think the competency-based learning is a fascinating topic and a great way to keep students engaged. But I wanted to ask you guys both your opinions on industry recognized credentials that aren't necessarily a credentialing program developed by a third party, but more, say, I'm with Mastercam, so like ones that are actually developed by manufacturers directly, whether it's, say, like Snap-on, Mastercam, Autodesk, whoever. How do you feel those can fit into the programs, or do you think that they belong into these programs?
Becky, I have a lot to say here, but please go first.
I just have a little bit. But we only have like 15 minutes, Tony, so keep in mind.
I'll be brief.
No, actually, so that's an interesting question, Clint, and pardon me, Craig McAtee can attest to this as well. So Craig and another gentleman were out at St. Louis last week. We were having a member assistance program. We participated in that with NCATC. If you don't know what that is, look it up on the website. I highly suggest your school do it. It's where they come in, do a bunch of focus groups, talk to internal people, external, all that. And Mastercam came up several times, actually, with companies who are wanting those, that we need to incorporate them more into our programs instead of being kind of, just a standalone class. So on our, with our non-credit programs, we don't have Mastercam as part of any of our programs, but with some of with the credit programs they do. So I think that's very important. To me, I think of those, even though it is kind of a credential as well, I also think of it as a skill set, right? It tells you what that skill set is my thought on that. So people know what those are. Those people in the industry, they know what Mastercam is, right? They don't have to wonder who, again, that third party is, who is deeming someone a master at Mastercam, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I can pick right up on that, and I agree with everything Becky said, and I'll give you another one. Cisco, you know, that's a well-known certification program. You pretty much can't get a job in the IT world without it. So they absolutely add value. But again, what competencies are being taught? Are they teaching just how to use Mastercam software? Are they teaching how to use Mastercam software and how to design and how to do what are best practices? And Snap-on is a little different because they're well known in the tool industry and in the automotive industry and everything like that. So sometimes those could be easy to lean away from because, oh, that's just Snap-on trying to sell tools. But I do have firsthand knowledge of some of their certifications, and they're teaching you proper tool utilization, safe practices with tools. And they're actually, some of those credentials are embedded all the way down into elementary school with K-Tech up in Wisconsin. So, but again, what are the competencies? Are they teaching me how to select a Snap-on tool? Or are they teaching me how to select the right tool for the job and how to utilize that tool safely? That's what employers are looking for. What can they do with those tools?
And so that you're saying is really the quality of the certification really matters. And that's where I think we're sort of struggling right now is we have like a multiple choice test. And I don't think that necessarily is a great way to show competency in those skills.
Exactly. It doesn't show competency. It shows knowledge, which is important. We want to test a credential should test knowledge and ability.
Yeah.
So Clint, the one I referred to where I said we kind of got away from that in our industrial maintenance was the same way. They already had to show the competency on the equipment to our instructor, but then they had to go take a huge exam that was very difficult. It might pull one small question from, but a 100-question exam. And so I kind of struggle with that. On our Boeing side, they have the program, they have the hands-on that they have to be able to show they can do. And of course, there are written tests and they're multiple choice and short answer, but they're open book, open note, because they're not expected to memorize everything about the theory, but they have to be able to know how to find it when they need it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
great feedback. Thank you.
If I can jump in, one of the things I'd say, Clint, too, is that just a different way, I think, to say what Tony said, and that is that the specific Mastercam skills are good, but they probably relate to some kind of generalizable skill about machining. And so I would probably advocate for 2 competency lists. One of them is the exact competencies to do, but then I'd take something like that comes from ONET or something from an independent source. Doesn't necessarily have to be a industry set of standards, but go to ONET and say, and find CNC machinists and say, these competencies are validated through this assessment. And if we're validating knowledge as opposed to a practical skill, you can say that this one only assesses for knowledge, and you might want to have them do a hands-on to demonstrate that then. But I think those generalizable skills are the things that make it more transferable and give you more credibility, saying, I'm not just teaching you how to use our stuff, I'm teaching you how to be a machinist.
That's great feedback. Thank you, guys.
Anyone else that hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet? I want to know who Jean Laughlin is with that cool picture. I don't know. Very creative person.
Most people think the picture looks better than the real thing.
So in all your creativity, do you have any questions or great examples of something you've done?
I just shared in the chat that North Carolina has a statewide committee that identifies credentials of value as part of our NC 2030 completion program. And I put the link in where you can see I think it's the most recent list that came out. So there's more consistency across the state in people recognizing these credentials.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Texas, we just met with our higher ed coordinating board this week, and they're changing our funding model 100% as we speak. We're building the boat as we're going across the Pacific, but it's going to be based on completion, on job placement, on no more just contact hours and credit hours and all that stuff. Anyone else?
You may not be able to see him on your screen, Linda, but I think Raymond was raising his hand.
Oh, yeah. Raymond, hi. You have another question or something to add?
You're on mute,
You're-
Ray.
Thank you, Tony. I'm not quite as eloquent as everybody else, and I just wanted to point out that demonstrated ability is really where it's at. I've approached so many different certification bodies who offer credentials and then credential the company to credential others. Waste of time. What we've done this last year with a number of our customers, specifically SpaceX, Boeing, and Northrop, they've had us set up labs near their facilities to train their people. Antelope Valley in Palmdale, California, Wichita State University for Airbus and Boeing and SpaceX, and some others. And so really demonstrated ability is where it's at. And so you folks have done a great job of identifying the issues. I mean, you're all right, hit the nail right on the head on each one of them. And so the way we're going about it is we're just setting up labs everywhere and offering training everywhere and offering online free stuff everywhere for allow people to accomplish what needs to be done and allow them to be hired and or upskilled at the different locations.
All right, one last question. Anyone else have a question? One of the ladies in the room? Nothing?
Becky has her hand up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
am I allowed to ask a question? I wasn't sure.
You have
it was
3
so-
minutes.
Okay, I'll be real quick. Jean, I just clicked on that link real quick. And I just looked at it for a second. Is that an actual list of the credentials that you have chosen, you guys have chosen to be or deemed to be of value? Is that what that list is?
Yes, ma'am. That's there's a committee that you can apply if you feel like you have a credential of value, and then that's reviewed by a committee that includes educators as well as industry experts.
That was my question.
And once approved, then we all recognize it K through 20.
Okay, that was I was really wondering, is it industry heavy or the committee, or is it, because sometimes as educators, we like to do this, like Tony said, build it and they will come. Here's what we have for you that's good for you. So I was wondering how much industry was involved. Thank you.
I am muted. I can't get back.
You're not muted.
There
You're
I
good.
am. I'm not muted. So thank you very much. Appreciate our speakers. Those of you that have questions, please post them right now. We can still see them. Otherwise, in the meeting invite, we can get you connected to all these speakers and each other. And with that, I'm gonna and happy holidays. Enjoy your time with your family and your friends. That's what matters most of life. We're all very passionate about all this stuff, and it's what we do for a living, thank goodness. But take time. With that, Craig, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Linda, thank you for your amazing moderation and insights. And Becky and Amanda and Tony, ditto. You guys really rock it and bring the real world to the screen for all of us. And I think that's really what this is all about. Raymond and Jean and Craig and everybody else that chimed in. That's what this is about. Thank you. I think whenever we go anywhere, what Becky just talked about, we were in St. Louis with her team last week. We hear all these different versions. And I think what capitalizing on what Raymond said, working with the automotive group down in the southern states over the last decade, found out that, demonstrated abilities is the key. First you get exposed to those knowledge, skills, and abilities, then you demonstrate that you can do it. Then you become, the next level for them is proficient at it. So those 3 levels, demonstrated abilities is a second level in the automotive area. I'm sure it's pretty similar in aerospace. And then the 4th level is mastery. And only between proficient and mastery are you able to train in it. So I think that model, demonstrated, exposed, demonstrated, proficient, and master is kind of a nice approach to how we all do things in life. And I just wanted to throw that out as an example. But I know we're up against the clock in a few minutes. Are there any final comments or words before we close? Well, I want you to all know we appreciate your time and your engagement. And I put the link for all of our strategic partners as well as our MAP member assistance program that Becky mentioned in the chat. And I really appreciate the links from North Carolina. They are one of the only states in the nation that actually give a lot of good funding for non-credit or skills training in that state, which we'd like to hold up as an example for the rest of the country at the ACC. And we've already started that process. We need to do more of that. But we will have recorded this session. It'll be on our website no later than Monday. So you can go under the webinar link and share it with other people if you'd like to. And really appreciate all of your chiming in. And with that said, we're going to have the same thing next year, 2024. We'll have a member drop in each quarter minimum. And we hope you look for that in your inbox in the near future. And as Linda said, have a great, oh, Tony, one more comment from your side. Go ahead. You want to say it out loud?
I wasn't going to take the time, so that's why I put it in the chat. But don't forget about the instructors. They need to be trained and certified also. So look for programs that have professional development.
Absolutely. And if you're at WDI, the AACC's major workforce conference of the year in New Orleans in January, we'll be there with lots of presentations, and we're focusing on attracting, retaining in faculty instructors for CTE programs. So come and visit us there. But you all have a great holiday. Merry Christmas. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the new year, if not sooner. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.